Hey everyone, I'm Jenny. Every video I put out is just my personal take as a weak hero fan, so if you think this deep dive gets a bit much, feel free to bail out. This is going to be one of my final week hero analysis episodes, and honestly, it's been such a dreamlike journey these past 2 months with all of you. I know my audio-focused style is pretty old school next to all the visual content taking over YouTube feeds these days, and in this fast-paced world of shorts, there probably aren't many viewers who'll stick around for long-form audio content. But maybe, like Sungjae would say, being
낭만학교.
stupidly romantic is exactly what passes the vibe check. I decided to keep going with this old-fashioned rambling style, and it actually helped me get over my work burnout, so romance really did come through. It's honestly mind-blowing that commenters who are just as old school and romantic as me keep finding this channel and hanging out here. Thanks for going the distance with me. I am planning to dive into the webtoon over summer break, and I'll drop my thoughts on the blog. After summer, Choi Young-wook has this Netflix series called Mantis coming out, so I'll be back with that review. Any leftover thoughts I'll save for the blog. Now, for today's episode, what if Su-ho had never slipped into a coma? Where would Su-ho and Si-eun's friendship have ultimately ended up? After binge-watching Class 1 multiple times, I think I've finally gotten closer to figuring this out. Wait, I'll be diving into some heavy content about adolescent psychology and mental health in this episode. There might be some triggering material ahead, so please back out or close this window if you think it might get overwhelming. So here's something I picked up on about director Yu. Through several interviews, I became convinced that he wasn't just trying to whip up a simple high school action story, but was also trying to weave in meaningful social commentary. Director Yu actually went undercover in teenage chat rooms while putting together the Weak Hero script. Fashion groups, study circles, health forums, even chat rooms where teens struggling with depression would hang out. He disguised his age and name to get a real feel for what teenagers are actually going through. What hit director Yu the hardest during this undercover work was finding out just how many kids were seeing mental health professionals and getting sleep medication because of stress. He said in an interview, "I was genuinely shocked to discover that so many young people are living under this kind of stress." When you first jump into Weak Hero, you get swept up by the cute, good-looking actors without even noticing time slip by. But as you binge watch it for the second, third time, you can't help but pick up on how deeply the drama digs into the psychological stuff teenagers are dealing with. The social problems, especially the messed up reality of boys growing up in the shadows of divorced families, grandparent-led households, and abusive parents. I'm not trying to pin down Si-eun's mental state with any specific labels here, but I personally feel like the production team really ramped up their efforts in Season 2 to spell out just how much Si-eun's psychological condition had deteriorated from Season 1. When you compare Si-eun's room between Season 1 and Season 2, the contrast is pretty stark. Everything has become barren and lifeless, and the boys' study room is now bathed in that same lifeless blue light seeping out from a weak desk lamp, with heavy shadows creeping in everywhere. The production team really drives home just how cold and hollow Si-eun's world has become after losing Su-ho. Looking at Si-eun in Season 2, he's dealing with severe insomnia, unable to fall asleep even past 3 a.m. Because of this, he's been slacking off on his studies at school and barely managing to doze off with his head down on his desk. Hold on, I want to touch on this analysis that one of my most dedicated commenters dropped about Si-eun's character patterns from Season 1. They said, Si-eun is a perfectionist, the type who'll tear himself apart trying to get as close to perfection as possible. He's blindly obsessed with being perfect, and he'll sacrifice basic life necessities for that perfection because he literally can't handle it when his pursuit of perfection gets thrown off track. They continued, early on in the series, Si-eun's goal seemed to be solely about getting into a prestigious university. But the moment his grades, his masterpiece, got even the tiniest scratch, he completely lost it. Then, for the first time in his life, he had precious friends, Bumsuk and Su-ho, but after Su-ho slipped into a coma, it wasn't just a simple scratch anymore. He felt like everything he had was gone. After reading this comment, I ended up having this really in-depth conversation about Si-eun's psychology with my friend who works as a teen counselor and originally recommended this drama to me. She casually mentioned that when she actually talks with teenagers, she hears about mental health issues and backgrounds that are way more varied than the violence and psychological breakdown shown in the drama. that what the series was really trying to do was seriously approach and touch on teenage problems. Speaking of which, let me share some of the psychological observations that my friend, along with many commenters, have pointed out about Shuin's childhood experiences and attachment patterns. Now, I want to be clear here, whether it's my friend, the commenters, or myself, none of us are trying to slap diagnostic labels on the boy or pin down exactly what's going on with him. The show gives us lots of hints about different things that could be affecting him, but they were really careful not to put him in any specific box. So, what we're doing here is just speculating and thinking it all through, but we'll never know for sure, and I don't think we're supposed to. In this scene where little Shun overhears his parents fighting, they were clearly arguing about whether or not they should have had him in the first place, and both of them were obviously regretting their decision to have a child. The husband was passing the buck to his wife, asking where she was while their kid got hurt to this extent. The wife snapped back in frustration, and then the husband said he had no idea that Si-eun would get hurt this often. Imagine a little kid directly overhearing their parents say they regret having him in the first place. This goes way beyond simple emotional neglect. It's like dropping an emotional bomb that could fundamentally shape how that child interacts with the world, society, and people as he grows up. Little Shun must have become convinced that to his career, obsessed, busy parents, he was an unwanted burden. So he retreated to his room, locked the door, and started obsessively working through math problems. Many commenters have pointed out that obsessively focusing on math problems can provide a source of comfort through predictability and control, and a way to cope with an unstable or unpredictable world. So when little Shun overheard his parents fight their indirect but clear regret about having him, he went back to his room, locked the door, and instead of lying on his bed crying, he obsessively worked through math problems. This could be an example of that kind of coping mechanism. Several commenters have also brought up that Shun's characteristics, his obsessively intense focus on academics, the childhood episodes where he would suddenly lose consciousness and collapse, how he socially isolates himself, his difficulty regulating emotions, especially when anger builds up, and the extreme stress he experiences when his own routines get disrupted. That these patterns might suggest he processes the world differently than neurotypical kids do, which I totally agree with. And then Su-ho came slicing through Shiyun's walls like a knife through butter, suddenly throwing open the door to his world through that misdirected food delivery. The deep attachment, happiness, stability, and love that he should have rightfully received from his parents, he experienced all of it in a short period like overwhelming waves. Su-ho opens that tightly shut front door when he mistakenly delivers to the wrong address. It makes you wonder if Su-ho hadn't mistakenly found his way to Shun's door. Would he have been able to break out of his shell? My friend said that while it was good that Su-ho helped Shuain break out of that solid shell, the relationship between these two boys was almost too emotionally intense to be called typical friendship. More precisely, she pointed out that the range of emotions Shun felt towards Su-ho was so overwhelmingly intense and wave-like that if these two boys had been friends in the real world, there might have come a point where Shun became overly dependent on Su-ho emotionally. What I totally agree with was this. Just like Shun had treated his perfect grades as a lifeline, that same perfectionist streak and intense focus he developed for anything he started holding, Deer would likely have shifted over to his other lifeline, his friend Su-ho. She went on to say that from a counselor's standpoint, just looking at the surface of the attachment the boy showed towards Su-ho, this couldn't be written off as completely healthy friendship patterns. Even his willingness to get his own hands bloody or take beatings in place of his friend came across more like desperate behavior. Like this kid who'd never experienced stable attachment was picking up on the fact that the uncontrollable breakdown that would hit him if this precious person suddenly vanished would be way more unbearable than any physical pain he chose to take on himself. In other words, Shun's coping mechanism of sacrificing himself to this extent for things like his perfect grades or Su-ho might not have been the healthiest thing for Shun himself. In this context, I think Shun having to go through the trauma of losing Su-ho was brilliant direction. For Shun to keep his life going rather than continuing to harm himself, he probably had to go through another painful but necessary growth phase, and sending Su-ho into a coma was, sorry to Su-ho, who ended up spending more than half his high school years in bed. I think it was a dramatically brilliant directorial choice. After the boy completely fell apart in Class 1, with nowhere willing to take him in, he barely dodged juvenile detention and got shipped off to Unjanghai. But thanks to that, he who'd been living like an emotional zombie ended up meeting Baku, Gotak, and Juntae, and his friendship with these guys, not too close, not too distant, gave him a much more sustainable friendship pattern to look up to. His decision to let go of Bumsuk's hand on that ring, the one that had been putting him through hellish sleepless nights, symbolized his determination to free himself from the guilt he'd been holding on to and his choice to heal and grow despite his losses. And while the drama didn't spell it out explicitly, anyone who really gets this show could feel the hope that Si-eun was slowly breaking free from the shadows of the deep psychological struggles that had been weighing him down. We can see his depression starting to lift when he's able to build meaningful relationships with people who accept him for who he is without expecting perfection. And if he can keep those kinds of relationships going with people who'll actually stick around, then maybe he gets closer to just being a regular introvert. Who knows how much he can recover? The massive psychological breakdown Shuhan went through as the price for losing Su-ho wasn't simply tragedy, but the psychological growth he had to go through. It's like a bird breaking out of its shell. You can't survive just by breaking out. Shun had to learn to live without his coping mechanisms, perfect grades, and Su-ho as his lifelines to truly grow into an adult. If he had kept trying to protect those lifelines by scarring his own body and shedding blood, he never could have grown up properly, and the people who care about Sheehan wouldn't want him to keep hurting himself either. So when Su-ho woke up from his long sleep and saw Sheehan running over with his friends, the fact that he said it looks good out of all things he could have said carries real weight. He was genuinely proud of and celebrating Shingun's growth into a bird that could fly on its own. Apparently, Su-ho's original line was supposed to be, "Our Shingun has really grown up." Season 2 wraps up with Shuan through the help of Baku, Gotak, and Juntae, being able to break out of his shell of isolation again and step into a society where he can connect with people and have genuine human interactions, finally saying goodbye to Bumsuk on that ring that had kept him awake, and building true resilience by forgiving himself and letting go of the crushing guilt. Well, you see, Sheehan seems to have grown enough to convince himself that he can build something sustainable with his new friends. As Baku's father said, be good to those guys, they're friends for life. And as Sheen's growth comes full circle, Su-ho wakes up again. Have you been living well? It looks good. It's such a beautiful moment that touched everyone's heart, one of those scenes we all absolutely adore. What ultimately makes Sheen's story beautiful isn't the revenge or violence, but this boy's growth. Thanks for listening, and I'll try to create audio content about Sheen's mental health struggles in Season 2. This will be my final week hero analysis content. Until then, keep analyzing, keep feeling, and keep falling. Thank you so much for everything.